Assalamualaikum and good morning everyone. Welcome to Razak School of Government 17th webinar in 2021, our 30th installment in total. Today's webinar is called Learning Outlook 2022. Before we get started, I would like to go over a few housekeeping items and the structure of our webinar session today. To those who follow this webinar through Zoom, please mute your microphones. We are also broadcasting this webinar live on our Facebook. This webinar session is divided into three segments. First, we will begin with key questions posed to our guest speaker. Then, we will answer questions from participants. At any time during the webinar, you may submit your questions to the guest speaker. Just type your questions in the chat and comment section. Please keep your question short and straightforward. As times allow, we will address as many questions as possible. Lastly, we will then wrap up today's webinar session. This webinar is recorded and you will be able to access this recording via our Facebook and YouTube page. Without further ado, I would like to introduce our guest speaker, who is none other than the Chief Executive Officer of Razak School of Government himself, Dr. Haji Mohamad Kamal Haji Harun. Prior to joining Razak School of Government, Dr. Haji Mohamad Kamal was the Assistant Vice Chancellor, Continuing and Private Education at University Technology Mara, or fondly known as UITM. He has a long-standing history of serving UITM, having held various leadership positions throughout his 30 years of academic teaching, which includes Deputy Vice Chancellor for Academic and International Affairs from 2017 to 2020, Deputy Vice Chancellor, Industrial and Community Networking, 2007-2010, and the Director of UITM Malacca Branch Campus. He has also held various leadership roles in other institutions as Deputy Vice Chancellor for Research and Innovation at University Malaysia Kelantan from 2011 to 2015, and the Director of Higher Education Leadership Academy, or ACAP, Ministry of Education, from 2015-2017. Dr. Haji Mohamad Kamal obtained his PhD from the University of Manchester in 1998, Master of Arts in Analytical Chemistry from the University of Northern Iowa in 1986, and Bachelor of Arts Chemistry from Knox College, Illinois in 1984, and a Diploma in Science, Institute Technology Mara in 1981. Dr. Mohamad Kamal, let us get started. The first question to the guest speaker is, what is learning to you? Please share with us your thoughts, Dr. Kamal. Dipersilakan.
Thank you very much, Encik Ismail Johari, for the kind introduction, and I would also like to take this opportunity to welcome everyone in this guest room to our RSOG webinar, and thank you as well for the questions that you just posted to me. What is learning to me? Okay, let me begin with saying this. I shall start by not taking what learning as a subject in isolation, but rather propose to put the purpose of learning in the context of three main elements that would be the learning itself and the acquisition of knowledge and the contextualization of learning and knowledge in making an educated person. So that would be the context of argument I'm going to put up to answer Joe's question. Well, we call Encik Ismail Johari Joe, fondly as Joe actually in our department. So thank you, Joe. Okay, so let me start by saying this: that to me, the purpose of learning is about cultivating the human intellect as well as the heart of the human, the qalbu, more specifically. Now, that's one reason why we embark on learning. The second reason is, of course, to acquire knowledge that we can use as a guide and basis to navigate our life in this world and hereafter, of course, in accordance to the values and tasks that is placed on human, that is to prosper ourselves, the community, society, nation, and the earth, to make good of all of us in this world. And the process of learning and acquisition of knowledge is no other than heading towards becoming an educated person. So that would be the context, Joe, that I'll be deliberating on this soundingly very simple question of yours, but yet it is a very difficult way. It's not going to be easy to answer that question. Okay. Now, what do I mean by cultivating the intellect and the heart in a human through learning? I believe that when we embark on the process of learning, we actually have got a lot of activities that is put up in the learning process. Definitely thinking is one of the means to learn things. Analyzing, rationalizing, reasonings and intelligence, communicating, listening and understanding, respecting and appreciating the scientific approach of discovering things, or what we call the scientific inquiry. And then we do connectivity, connecting and relating ideas, experiences, and to that of previous knowledge. And it is really about what you are trying to discover, the processes that is very much involved in the process of what you are trying to discover about a subject, about things, about situations. So these are basically the learning activities that actually cultivates your intellectual capability, in my opinion. Yeah. Now, the second part I touch about learning purpose is to cultivate the heart, which is because when you start learning, the learning must be accompanied with very high principle and discipline. That you have to be very honest and sincere to yourself about your ability of comprehending the subject that you're articulating or you're learning, even telling yourself truthfully, did I really understand within the context that is addressing the truth of the knowledge? So that's one area. So in order to achieve this, you have to really be humble and practice humility. Really, your intention here is to address your innocent ignorance, as stated by the great Professor Said Naqib Alatas. He expressed about not knowing things, innocently not knowing things. And we, just like a child who doesn't know things, innocently ignorant, and we are teaching him. So you have to be very humble and you have to practice humility in addressing your innocent ignorance. And you have a reason for embarking on this. That is, you want to know the whole range of things that causes the issues at hand. And that reason is a noble reason. And you also recognize this reason on why you're embarking on learning, that is basically dictating or telling us about your beliefs, your moral obligation, and your physical commitment. And that actually describes you as a learner. And the other thing is that learning itself is an amanah, because you have a purpose that is to acquire knowledge, to educate yourself, to perform your duties and purpose as a human being. And the context of the Muslim, we say Khalifah di muka bumi. So you need knowledge, and in order to acquire, to have that knowledge, you need learning. So it is itself an amanah. You develop your social conscience, you develop your responsibility, you develop your accountability as a result of the knowledge that you learn. You always be inclusive in your learning process. You develop your inner purification and love for knowledge, for wanting to know more because you want to be better. And you develop, quote unquote, your spiritual intelligence, and you become morally upright, and because you direct your knowledge for wisdom, and that you appreciate this intellectual aspect of the meaning of existence of a human being. So that's the part where I think the heart is being cultivated in the process of learning, not to mention the skills that you develop. When I spoke about thinking, analyzing, rationalizing, so you're developing your intellect, you're developing your heart for the purpose of acquisition of knowledge. And of course, Again, I would like to say Professor Syed Mohamad Nakib Alatas and Dr. Wan Muhammad Noor in his book, he mentioned that the acquisition of knowledge alone is not the context of education, but rather the ability to put that knowledge in the context of moral purpose that activates one who acquires it. In other words, there is a right action for the knowledge. And of course, the term that Professor Syed Nakib uses, adab. And so education then is a right absorption of adab in itself. So in other words, you embark on the activities of learning to acquire knowledge, to cultivate your heart and your intellectual capability so that you can quote unquote become an educated person. So that's very important in understanding the triangulation of between learning, knowledge, and being educated. So as Joe mentioned, I was, or rather still am, I'm very much involved in academic line, and I always tell my students that, you know, when you get a degree, it doesn't mean that you are educated until you are able to exhibit your humbleness, or you're being humbled by the knowledge and intellectuality nurtured in you to do things out of moral responsibility and of course accountability. So that's the value of their education in the context of learning as well as knowledge. And if I could go a little bit more, Joe, on this particular subject, because I think it's going to be, like I said, it's a one-line questions, but the answer is not going to be very simple. Uh, if we were to look back at the, I spoke on the context of education now, and if we were to look back at the falsafah pendidikan negara, the aim of education, as stated by the falsafah pendidikan negara, is very clear. So we want to produce individuals who are intellectually, spiritually, emotionally, and physical balance and harmonious, who can serve the society, who can serve themselves justifiably and serve the nation. They should be ones that practice high moral standards. They should be responsible and capable of achieving high level of personal well-being, as well as being able to contribute to the harmony and betterment of the family, the society, and the nation at large. So it's a huge responsibility of a person who has got this term, who at least want to claim themselves that they are being educated. And in fact, you have to be educated because that is no alternative for that in order to be a vicegerent on earth. So really, when we talk about education, we are preparing for people who have got this lifelong inclination to learn and to acquire knowledge for the purpose of serving the society as a knowledgeable and educated citizen. And if you are into a profession, say for example, you're an engineer or you're a doctor or any profession, it's perhaps it could be it would mean that you are a knowledgeable professional who thinks critically about the practice of your profession and who understand the meaning of his profession in relation to the people they serve, in relation to the nation, in the relation to the society. This is very much spoken by Paul Ashwin in his book. And so this means that learners are basically and fundamentally changed when they are engaged with the knowledge that they acquire, the education that happens in them, the intellectual capability and the shaping of their heart, the cultivation of the heart, actually change that person. In other words, they are being shaped by those qualities to become an educated person. So there are quotes that says that education is not a name of any degree or certificate or programs that you went through that can be shown to others as a proof, but rather education is a name of the attitude, the actions, the language, the behavior with others in the real life. These are quotes basically that appears in some of the sayings of people. So now, if you ask me in a more direct way, what would be the purpose of learning is actually really it's about commitment to acquisition of knowledge, and from the knowledge you will develop the level of capability to understand how to serve the society and the nation out of your moral obligation, being a knowledgeable person. And you need to have a context of being an educated person, because you see the thing about knowledge is the thing about knowledge is one single knowledge may not be able to serve the whole nation. You have to put the knowledge in the context of the society, in the context of the economic and all those various other contexts. So you need a whole body of knowledge to make your serving to be very meaningful. Culture, beliefs, and all those things. So really, I think learning will really strengthen your imagination capability, your conceptualizing, of course, your thinking. You're gonna have to coordinate and curate. You're gonna have to communicate and making things happen. And with all these qualities that you have, then you maybe you will be in a better position to serve as a vicegerent on Earth, as a learned individual, to create a better future. So that would be perhaps Joe, my response on the first questions that you just posted just now. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kamal, for very elaborate and profound introduction on the concept of learning, which we gather you correctly, sir. It goes beyond the acquisition of knowledge. There are a series of activities that accompanying that acquisition. And we also like the part that you highlight on the connectivity between mind and heart. And
Yeah.
you also emphasize on the need to look to the benefit of the society at large rather than looking at it as an individual pursuit. Dr.
Sounds good.
Kamal, allow me to go to the second question, which reads,
Yeah.
what are the current opportunities concerning learning? Silakan, Dr. Kamal.
Okay, thank you very much for this question. Okay, well, obviously, I think with advance of technology, I would say the biggest obvious opportunity in learning is your ability to get access to the knowledge that you want, and also modes and methods involved in getting towards that knowledge. My first take would be, let me address the issue, the factor of technology here. One thing for sure is you get access towards content. It really facilitates your ability to get to content of the subject that you want to learn. Now, not only these contents are available in front of you, but then these content are basically dispersed throughout the whole world. And with the technology, it really facilitates you to reach towards that content. You know, you can get access to global ideas, global forums, global debates and dialogues, you know, and argument, which you would like to use as a basis of your learning program. So that's one area that I think the opportunities that learners are currently having, and also, of course, don't waste this opportunity, because you can always get access to great philosophers, great thinkers, you know, great knowledgeable people, and in fact, you could always nurture the way to learn through the way these people are learning. So not only about the knowledge is available, but the approaches where people use to understand those knowledge that is the code, the learning itself is also accessible to you. Okay. Now, but however, if you want to basically take advantage of this platform of technology, you're gonna have to have an open mind. Listening is important. I always believe that listening is very much depending on your thought of listening. In other words, are you willing to listen the whole context of argument of the person that you're listening to in his frame of thinking, rather than taking the content that he put up and put it and frame it in your mode of thinking. So that will deprive you on the real issues that he or she wants to bring up, because you will be all the time framing the argument within your context, whether it's right or wrong, belief or not in your context. So the ability to listen the argument in the context of the person who's putting up the argument is, to me, a good art of listening, so that you will understand the perspective of things that is being elaborated by the person who put up the argument. Okay? And again, that would also goes towards conversation. When you are engaged in a conversation, be willing to listen to that person rather than forcing that person to just listen to you. That's not a conversation. So a two-way effective conversation that approaches towards learning will be allowing the person who you're conversing with to express their thought and ideas within the context of their thinking. You might want to listen to experiences of others who have gone through, may not be entirely the same experience that you wish you could, but then the actions or reactions, the approaches those person addresses in addressing his issues may inspire you to come up with new ideas or ways of addressing your issues and your terms of learning. So this is another way of opportunity that you get if you are willing to listen to experiences and put that experiences which is already in their context, but take all the qualities of thinking and try to embed it in your context. So there's another way. Now, of course, when I was at the university, I don't believe my students to learn only through lectures and listening to us. I think they can get bored, they will fall asleep. So we try to put the knowledge they learn into experiential learning. And the good thing about experiential learning is that you will understand the whole thing in a more bigger perspective. Let me give you an example. For example, we have a lot of program called Sulam in the university, where the students have got ideas, they have got projects that they learn from their classroom, their laboratories, and they want to put those projects in a society. Now, while they think that some of the project can be easily placed just like that in the society, they just realize that there are a lot of other things that they need to understand to make sure the acceptance of the society to the project. That's one thing, because that acceptance is important, because with the acceptance, only then the intended outcome of the project can materialize. You know, we take an example of, for example, if you want to put hydroelectric power in a kampung where the rivers are flowing very well, and here you put a hydroelectric power, you might want to understand whether this is accepted or not by the society. While your technology may be fantastic, but would that technology be accepted by the society that complies? So this will give you a real experience in navigating the knowledge you know, making it useful to a society. So the learning is very much in a perspective of the whole context of just pure knowledge, but you need to embed that knowledge in other segments of the knowledge about the society, knowledge about the culture of the people, you know, and these are the areas that I think would be a great opportunity of learning for learners. And the other thing is, of course, my advice will read a lot, anything, just read, whether it be newspaper, books, you know, articles, because reading can really open up your dimension of thinking. You can really open up your mind. Novels, these are good reading materials that can push your learning limits to a higher level. And create projects, because we at RSOG, we have a lot of projects and I'm constantly mindful of how people are responding to our project, because those are our learning element that we must embed to make the project a better project, a more beneficial project for those stakeholders who are actually engaging with our project. So those are areas that I think opportunities which we must not miss in learning, in constructing our learning encounter, Joe. Yeah.
You made a very good linkage, Dr. Kamal, with the question one, where you maintain your emphasis on society, and for us to serve the society better, there must be a wider understanding, so we can gain better acceptance. And you link it with technology, which is offer us enormous potential to gather many feedbacks, many views. But you caution us that try to not to put into our frame of mind, but try to understand others, and then perhaps we can serve the society better, inshallah. The third question to you, sir: how do you see learning going?
Don't call me Sir, Joe.
How do you see learning going forward, Dr. Kamal?
Okay, going forward, when it comes to learning, I think the area that we must emphasize is we must provide an inspiring learning condition for the learners. Okay, in other words, all learning programs must be inspiring, so that it entices the person who wants to learn more. Now, at the university in YKM, we have this some phrases that we think is important for us to share with the learners. Is it, if you just hear, you will forget. If you see, you may remember. If you do it, then you might understand the whole thing. Now, if you think, chances is that you will discover more. And if you feel the whole thing, then you would value it more. And if you were to share the knowledge, then you would gain more knowledge from others. So we have all these quotes that we always say it out to the student. But the point we are trying to make here is that when we say that the way forward in learning is about inspiring learners to learn, we would like the learner to take sole responsibility on their learning agenda. In other words, you're not here to fulfill some KPIs, but rather you're here because you want to learn. And if you can strike that learning desire on that person or on the learners, then I feel that the learning can be more effective. Okay, so we must provide learners the opportunity to learn via an exciting their mind. We must stimulate their senses and engaging with the effective and social nature of that learners himself. So I think that would bring in the desire to learn, the ability, or rather the commitment to learning. And therefore, if that's the way to go, I think the way forward is learning is beyond just textbook or beyond classroom or beyond lectures, beyond storytelling. Technology can be used to enhance learning because, like I said earlier, technology will provide access for learners to other areas, other people in the world, the thinkers, and this basically will be a very a learning through a very unconventional mode of delivery into the mind of the learners, and linking the learners to different parts of the world. And what is essential is basically to ensure that the learners experience a meaningful learning. So in other words, whatever they go through, the learning content actually brings meaning. I think if you ask me, what would be the way forward in learning is to really entice people to learn rather than forcing people to learn. Assuming the responsibility of learning, getting excited about learning, because you will be amazed what people will do when they are very excited in the subject that they are indulging in, or in the area there, because they can go beyond your expectation actually. So learning should go beyond just certificates or degrees, or PhDs or whatever you call it, and it must inculcate a personalized learning experience. Uh, you may want to have provision for them to be exposed to challenging tasks or content, for example, and of course, inculcate the values of learning. Now, I always believe that the way forward now is with the opportunities as mentioned in the earlier in your question number 2, Joe, is that learners can go through any path of learning. They can go anywhere and any place to learn, anytime, any context, with anyone or anybody, or even anyhow, and any device for that matter. So to confine learning in a very formal approach of addressing learning, that perhaps would be almost a thing of a past. Well, not that you're going to eliminate it completely. You're going to have to be. There has to be some guiding principle that I admit. Yes, it's so important that learn the right thing rather than learning the wrong thing. So there must be some guiding principles that come along with it, and the values that should be attached into the process of learning. But the point I'm trying to make is that among the learners, if you focus on the purpose of the learning and assuming the responsibility of learning, learning can be anywhere with anybody. You can regard yourself as a beneficiary. In fact, you can lead. You can even lead your learning program, your learning approaches. So that is my take on where do we go with learning. What's the way forward now with learning?
Thank you, Dr. Kamal. Looking at the string of questions that we received from participants so far, I believe you have enticed and inspired people to learn. We'll try to cover as many questions as possible, Dr. Kamal.
Sure.
Let me read to you the first question from Encik Shafiq from, I guess, from Kementerian Alam Sekitar.
Okay.
His question is, Dr. Kamal, in your opinion, what does an educated person look like today?
Okay. Thank you, Encik Shafiq, for the questions from Kementerian Alam Sekitar. What would be an educated person look like today? Yeah. Okay. An educated person will be a person who are highly intellectual. And my take on a person who's educated, they will display a form of behavior, a form of thinking that would always be of beneficial to the society. It's not self-centric, let me give an example. Somebody may be very good in computer programming, algorithm. Okay, this person would survive in this in the digital world now. But define survival. They could use the technology to either create My Sejahtera, which will benefit everybody, or they could create the technology to become a scammer. So of course, what would differentiate between the two persons? An educated person would want to serve the society. An educated person would be very feeling responsible for the knowledge they have or they acquire. They want to serve the society. So being a scammer is totally out of their mind. And wanting to create My Sejahtera, which could benefit everybody to track where they are, to warn them, to caution them, that would be the great thing that they would achieve out of being an educated person. Let me give you an example. Being a science person, I'm quite familiar with this knowledge on atomic fusion, nuclear reaction. Well, I got two choices. I could either create with a clean nuclear energy with that knowledge, or I could create, as I mentioned to my team, atomic bomb, which will destroy the whole people, even babies who are not even responsible for any conflict, but they get killed. So these are the kind of things that I would say an educated person would think deeply as to where the knowledge that they have should be directed towards. So to me, Encik Shafiq, educated people are people who actually give values back,
Right.
not only to himself, but to the society. So they're not thinking about themselves, but they are more inclined to think what benefit us as a human being on earth. So I mean that could be you could interpret that beyond that beyond what I've said. Yeah, thank you for that question, Tishavik.
You have been consistent, Dr. Kamal, in terms of your choice. It's always society over self. I think I will read to you the next question from Datuk Fasiha Hassan.
Okay.
He asks you, what is your opinion on the state of education in our country? If you were the Minister of Education,
I'm
what
not.
are the one or two changes that you would make to make our system more effective?
Well, there are a few things that I wish ideally we would we could embark on providing education. First is, of course, access to education is important. We do recognize that there are segments of the society who needs to have access to education. Now, when I talk about access, I'm not talking about I think the government has taken up a lot of responsibility in providing access by making education a public good, especially with the public universities that are around. But we still have to be very mindful about the opportunities of students getting into the universities for education. As I've mentioned earlier, the socioeconomic status of student would could be an element that determine the student's qualification for entry to the university. Now, I've worked in UITM, and in UITM we provide a whole range of programs beginning from pre-diploma right up to PhD for a reason. That is, a pre-diploma are basically an entry level that is provided by for the students who perhaps did not get a high grade enough to get into higher degrees. And this is means of access to higher education. And the students did not get a high grade enough, higher grade needed for entry to university, not because they are not clever, but perhaps the opportunities that they had in preparing themselves is not as good as those people who had the other side of the opportunity. And this usually happens in people with all socioeconomic level disadvantage compared to others. So that's one area that I think we have to be committed in ensuring access to higher education for students of different socioeconomic background. And the other area is that within the definition of education, as I've mentioned, the cultivation of intellect and heart, I think is critical in education. Therefore, defining education for the purpose of getting job alone may not allow you to construct a curriculum that focuses on building the person as what is being described by our falsafah pendidikan negara. We have to be a little bit more careful in constructing the curriculum for education. That is, it has to address both about building that individual, shaping the individual morally, intellectually, and at the same time have an ability to address the required task in the job market. So it has to be a dual prong, embarking from day one, focusing purely to get into the job may not be a holistic approach in constructing your curriculum. So due emphasis on producing students who are highly balanced, morally upright, at the same time very professional in abilities to address the job market would be perhaps a good strategy, a dual prong strategy. So I hope that answers
Yeah.
Datuk's question. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Kamal. I think you rightly link that questions to the falsafah pendidikan kebangsaan,
Yeah.
because in whatever challenges that we have, we should go back to the values that we uphold, the ideals that we have been uh, cherished all the while. Dr. Kamal, I will read questions from Puan Rahimah Adam and Dr. Raymond Maiden together, because
Okay.
both question is relating to humility. Dr. Raymond argued that in Western concept of education, the humility has been downplayed. Knowledge is
Yeah.
seen as a power.
Mm.
Uh, do you think we should promote more humility leaders as teachers? And Puan Rahima added, how can we cultivate humility in learning?
Well, I have to agree with Dr. Raymond on the term using knowledge is power. Power to do what? That's my next question. Uh, are you saying that when you have knowledge, therefore you have the reason to edge other people, to edge others, to exploit others? Is that what you meant by power? I'm not quite sure what would be the underlying meaning of the term power that's associated with knowledge, because my context of having knowledge is about to serve. You're the privileged one with the ability to acquire knowledge and to develop your intellect. And therefore, you have a responsibility that comes along with that knowledge. And certainly, humility would be an element that would make you humble enough to to serve people, or to serve yourself, to serve the nation, to serve the world with the knowledge. In fact, knowledge is a responsibility. I doubt very much if I want to subscribe to using knowledge as a power. Knowledge becomes a responsibility. It's an amanah now for you to serve, and this would be the context that makes people want to achieve knowledge because the satisfaction of serving. There is a perumpamaan Melayu, Dr. and Datuk, that is ikut resam padi, lebih berisi, kita lebih tunduk. In other words, you are being humble by the knowledge that you possess. You are basically you don't need to put yourself up there to convince people that you have quote unquote the brain, but rather the knowledge itself and the intellectuality that is built in you will automatically drive you to be humble, to be more responsible, and to be more accountable. If you understand the purpose of knowledge, if you understand the reasons for acquiring knowledge, I think that would automatically push you towards into these qualities of humility. Uh, if you really understand the purpose of knowledge. But and that is when the term education came in just now. And I said an educated person are humble people, but rather if you are short of education, the knowledge you use, the knowledge you have, could be used for something else that is focusing on your benefits alone, rather than the benefits of others. So that's my take on it. And I have to agree with Dr. Raymond and Dr. Rahima on the terms of knowledge is power, is something that I would perhaps not entirely subscribe. Yeah.
Dr. Kamal, if we
Yeah.
can expand further from that, another question from Dr. Raymond Maiden. I think this link to being responsible, being accountable. One
Mm.
of the challenges facing higher education today is plagiarism, people
Mhm.
cheating an exam.
Yeah.
How do we make students aware that they are actually cheating themselves and their fellow students?
Yeah. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
were in
Good
academics,
question.
sir.
Yeah. Good question. That is the reason I brought up the issue of being honest. And the purpose of education is about not only the ability to develop your intellect, but perhaps more importantly to develop your heart, to be honest that you are learning, and assuming the responsibility of learning to yourself, and we as educators are shifting the responsibility of learning to the learners. In other words, we could facilitate, but at the end of the day, only you would determine whether you are learning or not. Now, I have these phrases I shared with my staff, Dr. Raymond, that if my students get a grade through cheating, through plagiarism, through copying, then I will say, I will give you a grade to indicate how well you are at plagiarizing, how well you are at copying. So those grade doesn't reflect the knowledge that you acquire, but those grade reflects how clever you are at plagiarizing or cheating. So which one do you want? So these are the kind of things. So I think you're absolutely correct. The idea of learning is about to be able to be very open to yourself, be very honest to yourself, and and the other thing is perhaps that is when the inspiring part should come in, that you are learning because either you are very much interested in the subject, you're passionate about the subject that you're learning, and that's driving your learning effort, and that's driving your learning. And really, I mean, from my experience, my 34 years of experience, students who embark on this mode are learning of learning actually becomes more the impact of learning is much greater on them. They become more when they are inspired, they'll go beyond your expectation. They will they really feel for the knowledge that
Yeah.
serve them, and they could actually put the knowledge of something. And most of these students usually gain the real satisfaction in learning compared to those who are more focused on getting just grades and certificates. Yeah. Okay, that's that's my answer.
Thank you, Doctor. We have a question here from the Facebook,
Yeah.
from Encik Morais Shawang.
Okay.
He asks you, is learning useful for a person having high IQ?
I think learning would be easy for a person with high IQ. Whether it's useful or not, it's still useful because at the end of the day, the knowledge that he acquires will be the valuable thing, and the education that he gets through it will be the final benefit of the learning. But high IQ people will have easier, I would say, a lot easier path in terms of learning. They could comprehend better. They have got the numerical intelligence. They could have the foresight. They'll be inquiring more. They will be basically rationalizing more. And perhaps the rate of arriving to the real meaning of the knowledge is faster than those with a lower IQ. And for that, I think he could go beyond the subject that he's learning. I mean, the area, the coverage would be faster. So yeah, I think it is useful because at the end of the day, you need to get the knowledge, and the knowledge has in order to obtain that knowledge, you have to go through this process of learning. So yep, yeah, it'll be a lot easier, and we wish those high IQ people will have the willingness to share their experience of learning to the others, and the approaches that they use may be more effective than others, perhaps, for these people with the high IQs. Yeah.
I read to you another question from Encik
Sure.
Hazri, Doctor.
Mhm.
He said that Malaysia always rank high in the power distance index.
In
Does
the
that have any implication or bearing on our education direction? Should we
okay,
be worried, Doctor?
say that again. The first sentence.
Malaysia
Mhm.
ranks highest in the power distance index, according to study by Professor Hofstede.
Mm.
Does that have any implication on our education direction?
Okay. I may not be very familiar with the the poor distance index. If you could help me to elaborate a little bit on that one, please.
If
I know. Go ahead. Yeah. This is okay. Go ahead. We're talking about person with higher power distance. Could be a person with a higher level and a lower level in terms of knowledge. Is that what we looking at?
if I get the question correctly, Doctor, uh,
Mm.
our society,
Mhm.
we have this. Okay, the power distance index measures the
Mm.
degree to
Mm.
which the members of group of society accept the hierarchy of power and authority.
Mm. Okay. Yeah. And how is that related to the next part of the question again? Please, the
Does
second part
that
of the question. Mm.
does that hierarchy, the respect
Mm.
for hierarchy,
Mm.
affect our education?
Oh, okay, right. Well, okay, okay. No, I think I get it clearer now. Um, well, as I mentioned earlier, the power distance index, or rather a person with highly more privilege than the other, may have access to education better than those of not as highly ranked. If we take on economics context, let's take on economic context, the rich, between the rich and the poor, for example. I think yes, I would say that if we don't focus on closing in this gap between the rich and the poor, or the powerful and the less powerful, uh, it may affect on the overall performance of the nation one day, because you're going to have the elitists being far more superior than the mass, and what would a consequence of that will be the gap will become bigger, which is, I think, what we have been trying to address as much as possible, that is to close in the gap as well, be it in terms of power, be it in terms of economic. I mean, at the end of the day, uh, people do perceive that high economic will translate into highly powerful people, and lower economic people will translate into and less powerful people. But the point the fact that education is being provided is to address this big gap, or whatever gap that we were facing. We believe, even through our purpose of education, that the education is provided to address this gap, if at all it appears in any nation for that matter. That is to minimize the differences between the very rich and the very poor, or the very powerful and the less powerful. And that's the purpose of education. Yeah. Thank you.
Dr. Kamal, probably the last question from Fazraida.
Mhm.
He she said that technology is a tool to facilitate learning process,
Yeah.
especially now. What is your view on the investment on technology
Yeah.
for access to education?
Yeah, I agree that the technology should be treated as a tool, because when it talks about education, you go beyond technology. Education involve a lot of emotion, engagement, even communication. When I look at my students, the communication that was passed to me is not merely from the things that he or she says, but from the eyes, from the body language. I could tell whether they are with me or not, so and that is something that the technology might not be able to address. But then the platform for the students to use to enhance their learning could very much be facilitated by this. Yes, I agree to the suggestion that technology is indeed a tool. And should we invest more on technology? My answer would be yes, I think we should. um, When I talk about technology, I'm not only talking about connection, internet connection, but we have issues like virtual reality. When, for example, we can't bring the student into a certain country for the student to understand the culture of the country, or even we can't bring the student into a jungle, for example, for reasons that we can avoid, but we could bring the virtual jungle into the student's mind through virtual reality, for example, and then the student could see this through their virtual reality. So an augmented reality. So these are tools that could really help the student to gain not only access to information, but articulation of things, simulation of things that could inspire their learning, that could test that could put their experimentation mind into play through this mode. So if you ask me, should we invest more on enhancing the tool of learning? Well, I think we should. We should, because that would help the learning dimension to become broader than what is available in front of the student without the tools. Yeah. Thank you.
I think your answer rightly linked to your earlier answer to Dr. Pasiha, that we should provide we should provide as many access as possible, and
Yeah.
to give as equal opportunity for everyone for education. Dr. Kamal, we have come to the end of our session today.
Okay.
I would like to invite you to offer parting words to our participant, Dr. Kamal.
Okay. Parting words, I think we are in the right track to basically offer education to our people. Access is important. We want to ultimately develop progressive thinkers, people with strong principles, and possess creativity, and also a global mindset through our education approach. It doesn't have to be born by only one or two ministry, but if the whole society are collectively agreeing on the value of an educated society, a progressive society, I think we are heading towards a better future, a better nation. That would be my parting words on this. So let's commit on education,
InsyaAllah.
learning and education. Yeah, inshallah.
Dr. Mohamad Kamal Haji Harun,
Yeah.
kami warga di RSOG mengucapkan banyak terima kasih kepada doktor yang sudi menjadi tetamu kami dalam webinar RSOG yang ke-17 ini. Kami mendoakan doktor supaya sihat selalu dan dapat terus menyumbang kepada learning agenda, not only in RSOG, but for the society itself.
Terima kasih banyak.
Kepada para peserta semua, kami mengucapkan banyak terima kasih. Thank you very much for participating. We value your questions, your views, and your feedback. We would like to take this opportunity untuk mengucapkan selamat Hari Christmas pada rakan-rakan kita yang akan menyambut dalam masa terdekat ini. Dan to everyone, selamat tahun baru. Happy New Year 2022. Please follow us on our social media for future program. Sampai kita jumpa lagi. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Terima kasih sekali lagi Dr. Kamal dan
Terima
participants.
kasih. Yeah, thank you to all.